Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where today I'm recording this show live from Estonia. And I'm here to see if Estonia's digital transformation is everything that it's cracked up to be. And judging by the conversations I had at Tallinn Digital Nomad meetup last night, I actually think it exceeds expectations. Because before I came here, from my travels and conversations with leaders on this podcast, I thought that public sector is lagging way behind the private sector in all areas, in all governments around the world. For example, the Amazon one-click basket, Spotify knowing what we want to listen to, and Netflix allowing us to pick up where we left off on any device are all creations of the private sector. But dealings in the public sector, such as passport applications, tax filing, registering a name of a newborn child, or all of those life admin tasks, can feel like stepping back in time. But here in Estonia, the public sector is actually moving quicker than the private sector. So I invite you all to join me today as we embark on a journey through the future with Estonia, a country that has produced the largest number of unicorns per capita in Europe. And I want to learn more about how they brought 99% of government services online. And as of next year, it will be 100%. It's a great story, this one. And Ott Velsberg, the Government Chief Data Officer at Estonia, is going to tell me all about it. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to Tallinn, where we will take a deep dive on Estonia's journey to becoming known as Estonia. But enough from me. Let's get today's guest on. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name is Ott Velsberg and I'm the current Government Chief Data Officer. So as part of my role as a government CDO, I oversee the strategic coordination of data ecosystem within the Estonian government. So this includes artificial intelligence, something that people often talk right now. But similarly, other things that are more mundane, for instance, data governance, open data, but also how to ensure privacy when processing data. So various different topics.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. There's a lot I want to talk about. Now, bearing in mind, we're going to have a lot of people listening from all around the world and different governments in different countries. And traditionally, I think tech has moved at such a big pace, and we're all used to it in our daily lives with one-click baskets and Netflix and stuff, but governments have struggled to keep up with that pace. So I want to talk about the e-government basics here. So can you explain the core philosophy behind Estonia's approach to e-government and why you think it's an effective strategy?
So Estonia has always prioritized digitalization, and it started off as a way to cost cut. But at the same time, it is more convenient for citizens to access services. It helps to save time. So one of the core philosophies behind it is make government more lean and also efficient. But at the same time, we oftentimes see that there are various government services that people actually don't know that even exist in a physical realm. So for instance, what type of benefits the government could actually provide you? Oftentimes, both companies, but also citizens don't have any idea about that. So our approach that we are trying to move towards is a more proactive and personalized government, whereby a citizen has an overview of what type of support the government can provide, also choose how and on what terms the government and its communication is actually taking place. And behind all of that is also empowering citizens to take charge of the government-held data itself. So really support how we are generating value from government-held data.
And I think for anybody listening outside of Estonia, the first thing that they will think is, whether you're in a business or a government, to make any tech project a success, you need buy-in, you need people to understand, hey, we're doing things differently now. And the first thing they'll ask is, what's in it for me? And there'll be a few concerns along the way. So on that side of things, and also regarding to repurposing of data in the public sector, can you elaborate on the concept of consent service and how Estonia has managed to get a large number of your citizens to agree to this practice? And I'm not just saying this because I've read it. I've spoken to a lot of people here, and being a cynical Brit, I was expecting people to be fighting against it, but it's quite the opposite. Everyone's quite progressive and for it. So I've got to ask, what's the secret there?
So before I jump into the consent service, I will talk about citizen-centric data governance. So the idea of a citizen-centric data governance is, as I mentioned earlier as well, empower citizens to take charge of their governmental data. So from one end, we have implemented a tool called Data Tracker, which provides a transparency of how government and various different entities are processing citizens' personal data. But on the other end, it is about enabling citizens to share government health data, but also hopefully in future private sector health data as well, with various different stakeholders that might benefit or provide more personalized services or so on.
Yeah.
And here comes in consent service. So the idea of a consent service, and I will explain it through an example. Imagine you go to a bank and you want to get a loan to buy a new car. Typically, you need to fill in various different forms. The process takes a lot of time. To get comparable offers from various different financial institutions, it's not an option.
Yeah.
But imagine if you can just authenticate yourself with EID, you then give a consent for the various different financial institutions. Why not all 20 plus banks?
Yeah.
And you get offers in 2-3 minutes because they already have information about your salary, how long you have worked, what are your different working habits, and so on. So all the information that they need to make a decision about your credit trustworthiness, you can give a specific consent for only that specific purpose once, and they can make that decision faster.
Mm.
And we have really seen that this is only on this specific example, over 200,000 consents has been already generated since last year. So there is a tremendous potential. But this goes even further. So if we look at the biobank or genome data, 200,000 plus Estonians have donated their genome data just to support kind of the agenda that the government has, making government truly, or the country truly, digital and personalized.
I was having a great conversation with somebody yesterday. We were talking about concerns around things like health data. And he said to me, Neil, in the UK, do you know how many people have looked at your health data, whether it be the doctor, the nurse, somebody working in the hospital? Do you have a way of knowing exactly who you've consented to see that information? And I said, no, obviously. He said, well, how can you criticise what we're doing here? Because all our citizens know exactly who's looked at that. And it was a real eye-opening moment for me. It's such a step forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. But at the same time, we still see sometimes the questions as well. But what if we have done anything wrong? Being silent about how you process or if anything actually has been gone wrong is not the best way to move forward.
Yeah.
Transparency is what builds trust. And also, if something goes bad, then in the end, actually taking an ownership. From the healthcare side, of course, people have misused the trust that we have given, looked at patients' data that otherwise shouldn't have. But via data tracker or even through logs, you're able to understand and find those malicious cases whereby that doctor shouldn't have looked at my personal health information. But if you're not tracking, then how do we really achieve the transparency that we want to have? So I think kind of transparency and trust in the end builds a stronger government and society in the whole. So I think this is something that more governments should actually pursue. I haven't seen that so far.
Yeah, 100%. I think data regulation is such a hot topic right now. So, I mean, on that side of things, how are data usage and indeed AI, another big topic here, how are they regulated in Estonia? And are these regulations different from other countries? And if so, how and why? I appreciate there's about 3 or 4 questions in there. But...
Yeah, so in short, I've been always in that opinion that if we regulate AI, then we should do that across Europe to have a more holistic market itself. I don't see any value whereby countries differentiate and have different regulations on technology itself. If we do work on regulation, it should be technology agnostic. But talking about AI regulation, back in 2018, when I joined the government, it was a funny story. There were discussions of whether AI should have a separate entity status. So in essence, AI would be responsible for itself. And there were actually discussions like, should we have an AI regulation? Should we really make AI responsible for what happens? After long discussions and legal analysis, we found that it doesn't solve anything, because we need to build up a huge financial kind of insurance system which doesn't exist. There is less kind of track for responsibility. So it didn't make in the end sense. But this was the closest that we were in some sense to a regulation itself. So the short answer is we don't have a regulation specifically addressing AI. However, we do regulate data quality, metadata, data privacy, and so on. So it is more across different kind of technology itself. But right now, what we are really looking forward to some degree is AI regulation or AI Act. So on a EU-wide, regulate how AI and in what circumstances you cannot use AI. But there are issues that I think still needs to be addressed.
Yeah, 100%. And last year, well, I'll say the last 8 months, generative AI just seems to have woke everybody up to the possibilities, maybe a few concerns as well. And I was at the Tallinn Digital Nomad meetup last night. Predictably, it was brought up on how it might impact digital nomads' lifestyle, especially freelancers, etc. So from your side, though, what are the latest AI developments in the Estonian public sector? I imagine it's something that you're following very closely. And are there anything expected to change, or could AI impact the way government services are provided in the near future? You probably can't share too much at the moment, but is anything you're exploring?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit. So my team is working hands-on on supporting different government entities in AI implementation, and we're also responsible for our government AI strategy. So part of that, we've been kind of shifting our focus from one end, from central government to some degree to municipalities itself, local government. So within the central government, right now we are really kind of in that turning point whereby different proof of concepts have showed they bring results, and now it is about implementing and reaping the benefits. So from identifying different hidden compartments in the toll or in the border control to tax revenue evaders and so on. So different very specific use cases, but also kind of more humanistic as well. Summer is coming soon. So finding people who are lost in the forest. Estonians love foraging. So every summer people get lost in the forest, and the drone operator working hours sometimes are 18, 19 hours long.
Wow.
So how to support them as well, finding the people. Their eyes get tired. Going back to the local government, it is really about trying to support using, for instance, drones, but also energy optimization. So managing different buildings in terms of air quality, energy, water optimization, using drones to understand traffic violations, also helping to understand what different areas needs building, kind of build up or maintenance and so on. So there are very different use cases, but more interesting perhaps regarding the LLMs is definitely kind of integrating that possibility or capability with our own government virtual assistant Bürokrat, which we are developing and implementing right now to provide access to government health data in a more easier way. So people can ask who has received an award from president in 2092, blah, 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 and you can get actually the answer. There's a lot of interest, but we'll see where it goes. And just to finally wrap up, we need to invest a lot in Estonian language technology itself. So something that in English-speaking countries is oftentimes taken for granted, for instance, grammatical corrector. This is actually something that we right now work on. So we don't have grammatical corrector.
Right.
Similarly, almost close to a year ago, we didn't have real-time subtitling solution. Now it is implemented in our national broadcasting. So these are not kind of life-changing in terms of ChatGPT, but they are life-changing for the society that we live in. So grammatical corrector will definitely change people's lives towards better.
And that's one of the reasons I record this podcast. I try and get people thinking differently about how technology is impacting their world. And everything you just listed there, people have got it in every city where they live, and they don't think about the role of technology. But of course, as technology further enters the critical infrastructure of governments all around the world, we've talked about regulation and the need for it and how it doesn't actually exist in many areas at the moment around AI. But are there any gaps in AI regulation based on, would you say, national and international level? How should they be addressed, do you think? I appreciate, again, it's a big question, but where do you stand on that?
So the biggest gap, in my opinion, is that there are too many different, not coherent views of what are the principles of trustworthy AI or how AI should be regulated itself to begin with. So if you look on an international scale, OECD, European Commission, UNESCO, and the list goes on. They share some similarities in their approach, but the definition itself of what AI is, what are the different principles that should be followed, they differ. And the biggest problem I see right now when people are talking about AI to begin with is that they are not talking about AI. They are talking about various levels of an autonomy and just having an impact on decision-making or service provision itself. And we have taken AI as a thing that everyone are talking about and using this to regulate the technology itself on a very wide scale. And people oftentimes raise that we need to protect kind of human rights and so on when it comes to AI. And for this, we need new regulation. You need to follow and kind of human rights anyways.
Yeah.
Similarly, you need to preserve people's privacy. This is nothing new. So people tend to forget that everything that they are right now talking and saying that you need to keep an eye on data quality and so on.
Yeah.
Those requirements have existed for a long time. So I don't see a gap right now. Maybe I'm kind of negatively stance right now, but we should wait and see what are actually effects. We shouldn't regulate in areas we even don't know the outcomes yet. There are discussions whether metaversion should be regulated. Where is metaversion? What are we actually regulating? So we're sometimes so afraid of the new that we preemptively try to restrict and control. But on a kind of global level, there is no consensus to doing that. So we end up making isolated islands, basically, where we have some type of regulation that more inhibits than supports innovation. I think this is a wrong way to go.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something else I'd love for you to elaborate on, and that is the idea of a Sputnik moment in the context of tech advancement. So can you tell me how that applies to Estonia and indeed other nations listening?
So if we look at right now, when we talk about AI specifically, then kind of the two major powers working on AI are United States and China. And similar to Sputnik moment itself, there should be a sense of urgency. For instance, in Europe and in Great Britain as well, that what are our capabilities? How much can we impact? What is our saying? So when Sputnik, at the moment, kind of raised the urgency in the United States, similarly, I would say that different countries need to understand that we need to prioritize innovation. We need to prioritize our companies. We need to enable companies to invest in new tech, understand how governments themselves can actually support them. So if there are any gaps in the ecosystem right now that we should address. So basically, we need to really try to understand how we can support companies actually moving forward.
And some countries are more technologically advanced than others. How can those lagging countries catch up? What are the consequences if they don't? You know, if they ignore what's happening here around the world, will they get left behind, do you think?
Hopefully, we don't leave them behind. So one of our approaches also has been to really build kind of the GovTech stack that various different governments and also private sector entities can actually utilize. And similarly, this is our approach internally as well. So again, bringing as an example our AI strategy, then we saw early on that the government is more digitalized than the private sector. And we have better capability to actually utilize and reap the benefits.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we saw our role as leading and being kind of a role model for the private sector. So various different companies that we develop, they are actually open source. So both us in the government and private sector and other stakeholders can actually utilize. So Bureaucrat, our government virtual AI assistant, the grammatical corrector that we develop, real-time subtitling solution, text analytics toolkit, and the list goes on and on. They are available to all stakeholders.
Right.
Free of charge. So you can adapt, you can implement, but the idea behind of all of it is community-based development. It is not about competition. It is about actually making people's lives better. And from the GovTech community side as well, how we can actually do both technology and expertise and skills kind of migration to other countries that actually need that support. So we've been always trying to learn from others what they have done well, but also educate others as well who need that.
And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I learned that you've been involved in the implementation of over 50 innovation projects. So can you share one or two projects that you're most proud of and why?
The first one that we are still working on, but the implementation is ongoing, is Bureaucrat. This is just a really huge project in itself. Bureaucrat is a government AI virtual assistant. Right now it is implemented in 6 government agencies. The idea itself is enable in future citizens to decide how and through what channels they are able to interact with the government, get various different services, and also make the government truly accessible. So part of the Bureaucrat, we're also looking, for instance, on sign language recognition. So making the government truly accessible through any device, anywhere, using your preferred way of communication and getting actually the services you want. So this is one of the more innovative aspects. Just to shift from AI, I'm really looking forward to what happens with consent service. I already see the tremendous potential it has on kind of helping us to rethink how the government and private sector and society itself actually provides services. So this, I feel, opens up a new way of providing integrated services, for instance, in insurance, in transportation, in agriculture, and so on. And right now we are kind of looking into extending it from citizen data to private or companies' data. So again, this will in the end change the dynamics. You are able to sell your data. You are able to actually implement the know your customer or once only principle across different domains and sectors. So I'm really looking forward. It has just a kind of a foundational aspect that really can change the way the society operates.
Wow, incredibly cool and a great moment to end on. But before I do, I think one of the things that we have all got in common, no matter where anybody's listening and wherever they're living, is that pressure on everyone to be in an almost state of continuous learning. So I've got to ask, for someone such as yourself, you're innovating, you're pushing the envelope continuously forward. How or where do you self-educate? How do you do that?
During my current role as well, I finished my PhD at the University at Informatics, and kind of part of being an associate researcher, you need to continuously keep up with the science side as well. So this is really one side, finding the time to actually keep an eye and track on what the academic discourse is doing. But I try to always fill in all the kind of empty spaces with ebooks and podcasts. So this is the way to go forward. And one thing that we have enjoyed with my significant other is taking similar online courses as well. Cool. So something new that you can take together. So this is a nice way to work on a specific project, learn something new. And for listeners, my wife is not from the same domain. She's a doctor, but this is a nice way to learn from each other, but at the same time, learn something completely new.
Absolutely love that. And for anyone listening, maybe they're in a government, maybe they're not, maybe they just want to learn from what you're doing in Estonia. Things like the digital nomad visa, e-residency, there's a lot we've not touched on today. To learn more about what the Estonian government's doing here, is there any way you'd point them at all?
So definitely, if you want to learn about artificial intelligence, open data, and everything I have been talking about so far, Kratit.ee and Kratit, hopefully listeners can find from the description. It comes from the word artificial intelligence. So Krat for us is a mythological creature, and it was built from hay and stages, and you typically had to donate a few drops of blood.
Really?
And Krat actually carried out different tasks. But as you understood, it is from devil, so you always have to be a little bit cautious. So we are using Krat as actually a synonym for AI itself. So Kratit.ee is basically artificial intelligence or something like that.
Well, I will be checking that out. I think we covered so much in a short amount of time there, from e-government basics, consent service, data regulation, AI developments and AI regulation. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your story and the great work that you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much I loved about that conversation there, about how some countries are so technologically advanced and others are 2 steps behind. It certainly made me think differently about life in the UK compared to Estonia. But I loved hearing more about the reasons for it, the impact, and that Sputnik moment about how we can make the most of it. I know there's a big topic at the moment around AI developments and regulations, and also consent services and repurposing data, because the public sector is using customers' data according to consent. And I think this is the real game changer in there. And as it's been pointed out to me several times here, in the UK, I don't know who's accessed my data, but over here, they do. And that's got to be a step forward in terms of progress. And what's at the heart of that? It's technology delivering trust and transparency. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about today. As always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @NeilC. Let's keep this conversation going. It's something that will impact every single person listening, wherever you are in the world. And I'd love to hear different viewpoints on this. But that's it for today. So just a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.